Here. Mr. Hayek?
Here.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Here.
Mr. Martin? Mr. Morrison?
Here.
Mr. Gilbert?
Here.
Here now.
Here. Lawrence? Dr. Shabilsky?
Here.
And Mr. Powell?
Yes. I'll ask everyone to please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will now entertain a motion in accordance with the provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, being hereby resolved that the board move into executive session to discuss confidential HID and personnel matters, after which action will be taken. It is expected that the matters discussed in the executive session will be made public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Second? All in favor? Aye. We'll be back in half an hour. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started now, please. Do I really have to? Thank you. We're back in the public session now. The first order of business is the superintendent's comments.
I'm going to steal your mic, actually. I'm going to save my comments for the presentation, so you can move on to the next items on there.
And board president, no particular comments other than to thank you all for showing up tonight. Mr. Stiles, business administrative comments.
I'm going to do a detailed line-by-line audit. No comments, Mr. President.
We have our two new student representatives here for the first time tonight. They won't have any stage fright with this number. For those who don't know them, I will introduce John Ober is actually our alternate and has a member of his family sitting across the dais from him, and Becca Bytel. So I will hand it over to you two to give us your reports.
All right.
And speak into the microphone if you can.
Yep.
The hardest part is deciding which of you is going first.
I know, really. You know how this works. We're pleased to report that 6 Watchung Hills Regional High School students have advanced to the semi-finalist round in the 2019 National Merit Scholarship Competition. Semi-finalists are Ishka Agrawal, Jeremy Kui, Sarah Dang, Joy Liu, Annika Schmidt, and Timothy Zhang. This year's 6 Watchung Hills Regional High School National Merit semifinalists means that 48 Watchung Hills Regional High School students have qualified as National Merit semifinalists during the most recent 5 years, including 15 in the class of 2018, 10 in the class of 2017, 6 in the class of 2016, 11 in the class of 2015, and now 6 in the class of 2019. Another 27 Watchung Hills students have been named the National Merit Commended Students, the category just before semifinalists. These designations were made based on the scores of students who sat for the 2017 Preliminary Scholastic Aptitude Test / National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. Annika Schmidt, a senior at Watchung Hills, earned the highest possible ACT composite score of 36. The ACT consists of tests in English, mathematics, reading, and science, each scored on a scale of 1 to 36. A student's composite score is the average of the 4 test scores.
On average, only around 1/10 of 1% of students who take the ACT earn a top score. In the U.S. high school graduating class of 2017, only 2,760 out of more than 2 million graduates who took the ACT earned a composite score of 36. In early September, Watchung Hills Regional High School's Nilay Trivedi attended Silicon Valley's TechCrunch Disrupt conference, where entrepreneurs, engineers, and designers meet to discuss cutting-edge trends in technology. He earned top 10 finalist status with his use of Amazon Alexa to build a voice-activated, artificial intelligence-based homework and lesson plan generation app, which can be used by teachers to automatically generate to practice content and share it with students through Google Classroom. Nilay was also invited to the MIT IEEE Undergraduate Technology Conference. At this annual showcase for research conducted by undergraduates, he shared his research paper on using artificial intelligence to improve biological solar cells. Senior Kathleen Luau's paper on development and characteristic of plastic composites was accepted into the MIT IEEE conference. Kathleen attended the conference in early October to present with her team members.
Freshman orientation was held on Wednesday, September 5th between 7:30 and 10:30 a.m. The students reported directly to the PAC, where they assembled as the class of 2022 before following their schedule through an abbreviated 8 periods and meeting with their teachers. Senior Student Parent Night took place on Wednesday, September 12th. 12th grade students and their parents met in groups with counselors to talk about the college application process and post-high school plans. The Guidance Department hosted Financial Aid Night on Wednesday, September 26th at 7 p.m. in the Performing Arts Center. Tom Foga, a college financial aid officer with the state, offered a presentation for parents of seniors. The financial aid presentation has been posted on the Guidance website for your reference. After rescheduling from a rainout on September 14th, the ASC Student Council organized the annual pep rally on the turf field last period on the following Friday. It was coordinated with Homecoming, Spirit Week, and the Homecoming celebration at the game on the evening of September 25th. In addition, the Diversity Club, led by senior students, sponsored a whiteout against bullying during the day and at the game on September 21st. We held a back-to-school night on Thursday, October 4th. The faculty did an excellent job of sharing our instructional program with the parents. We were also very pleased by our peer leaders' volunteer efforts to serve as guides for the parents.
The cross-country team is off and running and will be competing in the county tournament this Thursday at Phillipsburg. The girls' team took 4th place in the county championships last week, and Laura Baynes finished 4th individually. Boys soccer, their record is 7-2-3. The soccer team is enjoying a successful season on their new home field on Mountain Avenue. They are in contention for a conference championship. Girls soccer with a record of 10-2. The Lady Warriors are contenders for the county championship titles as they take on Pingree this Saturday in the semifinals at home at 10 a.m.
Really quickly, the boys soccer conference championship game was played today, and we beat Pingree 1-0. So.
Thank you, John and Becca. I'm now going to call up our still relatively new athletic director, Dan Root. We're going to do a student recognition for the spring 2018 sports. Of course, all of last year's seniors are gone, so that'll make this somewhat brief.
And yeah,
John and Becca, if you could assist
they're gonna help me
Dan in
with
this, that would be.
And just a disclaimer to the parents and students out there, as long as you RSVP'd, we have you set to get your award. If there's anyone here, there was only 4 folks that did not RSVP, so if anyone is here that did not respond, just touch base with Mr. Root so that we can make sure that we recognize you tonight, okay?
Good evening. As most of you are aware, the 2017-2018 school year, Washington Hills experienced a historic year athletically. This evening, it gives me great pleasure to recognize our teams and athletes who received athletic honors for the 2018 spring season. So I'm going to go about this in an alphabetical sport manner, and then within that as well, I'll also do the names alphabetically. So as I call your name, if you would come down, if you would also hold your applause until we have all the honorees of each individual sport. We start this evening with baseball. We have Matthew Alarcon. So we're going to try that one more time. If we just hold the applause, stay here, Matt, and then as for each individual sport, you'll stay here. Once we get all the honorees of that particular sport, then you can applaud, and they're certainly well-deserved. So Matthew Alarcon got first team all-conference this year. Our next honoree is Benjamin Ant. And I know there was a question, and he may not be able to be here, so that might be a all-conference honorable mention. And our next honoree this evening is James McKenna. James here? Oh, James. All right, and he was all-conference second team. So now we can indeed. So our next sport is boys golf. Our first honoree is William Di Giacomo. Will was so the golf team this year was Group 4, Section 1 and 2 state champions, and also Somerset County champion. Wesley Kuhn, also Group 4, Section 1 and 2 state champions and Somerset County champions. Liam Larkin, golf team's well represented, good job, guys. Group 4, Section 1 and 2 state champions, Somerset County champions, all conference second team. Brad Pinho, again, Group 4, Section 1 and 2 state champions, Somerset County champions, all conference second team. Owen Rossman, all right. Group 4, Section 1 and 2 state champions, Somerset County champions, all conference first team, and Courier News Golfer of the Year. Clement Shao. Oh, we almost had him all. Oh, he is. All right. Group 4, Section 1 and 2 state champions, Somerset County champions, all conference first team. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our golf honorees. Our next sport is boys lacrosse. Adam Claxton. Group 4 North 2 sectional state champions this year was boys lacrosse. Joseph Denave. And again, I'm going to keep repeating this. Group 4 North 2 sectional state champions. Daniel Labib. If this sounds familiar, Group 4 North 2 sectional state champions. Makai Parkey. Michael Salerno. Also again, Group 4 North 2 sectional state champs. Christopher Susoglu. I worked hard on that name, by the way. Group 4 North 2 sectional state champions. Jack Taub. Again, Group 4 North 2 sectional state champions. Anthony Tomero. Also Group 4 North 2 sectional state champs. Brendan Wallers. And again, for the final time, Group 4 North 2 sectional state champions. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our boys lacrosse honorees. Good job, guys. Our next sport is girls lacrosse. Our first honoree is Madeline Murphy. There she is. Madeline achieved all-conference second team this year. Our next honoree is Shannon Twill. And Shannon got all-conference first team this year. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our girls lacrosse honorees. Our next sport this evening is softball. Our first honoree is Sophia Cicchetti. And Sophia was all-conference second team this year. And our next honoree is Julia Shinnick. And Julia got all-conference honorable mention. Let's hear it for our girls softball. And our final sport this evening is girls track and field. Our first honoree is Laura Bayens. So Laura was part of a team that was a Group 4 North 2 champions and was also all-conference first team. Our next honoree is Alyssa Blocker. And again, part of the team that was the Group 4 North 2 champions. Our next honoree, Mahogany Jenkins. Again, also Group 4 North 2 champions, all conference first team, all state second team. Portia Jones. Teresa Rotolo. Again, a part of the team that was Group 4 North 2 champions. Jamie Tomasetti. And again, also part of the team of Group 4 North 2 champions. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our girls' spring. And I do have 3 here of the people that did not respond. Someone that came that we missed. We certainly don't want to miss anybody. Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We're just going to give the students a chance to, and their parents a chance to leave, and then we'll resume. Just before we start our update on progress at the school this year, I do want to take a brief moment and go back to President's remarks. The school, and many of us on this board, lost a good friend on Friday with the death of Nick Stevens. Long Hill Township, Nick had been the president of the Long Hill Township K-8 Board of Education for a number of years and served on it for more years than that. He was a liaison to us. He's always been a huge supporter of the school, and unfortunately he died in a cycling accident on last Friday. So our thoughts and our prayers are with Kelly and the rest of Nick's family. Next part of our agenda now is the update on progress towards our goals, and our superintendent will get us started.
Alexis up here as well.
And our principal, of course.
Welcome. It's actually nice to have an audience for this presentation. The leadership team puts a lot of work, time, and effort into pulling all of this information together, and it's actually nice you get to see kind of the results of all of your efforts with the students, because tonight's when we actually celebrate all of their achievements and all of our student performance results, which show tremendous growth on their part, and that's obviously due to the leadership of you in the classroom. So you'll get to see some of that tonight. It's our strategic plan and our district vision really drive all of our conversations. The board conversations when we're looking to develop board goals each year, as well as our district goals and your departmental goals. And I think what the board will see tonight from the presentations, we will first start off with an overview of our student performance results, which we are required to do once a year by the NJDOE, and then that will be followed by each of the department supervisors presenting on their departmental goals for the year, which are aligned with our strategic plan. And what you're going to see are the tremendous efforts on the part of the staff to really find a balance between rigor and wellness for the students, and helping them grow and develop into young adults. One thing just to note that's a little bit different with this year's presentation than in the past is this year's timeline is different than it has been in the past, so we're giving this presentation about a month earlier than we generally have, which means that much of the data that we usually report on, in addition to the state performance data, has not been made available yet. So there are some of the comparative data that we normally share that we won't be able to share in this presentation, so we'll follow up with that in the future at a future education committee meeting or a future board meeting, depending on the wishes of the board. And you'll see some of the data on the slides is indicated as unofficial because we don't have the official state and national averages yet for things like SAT and ACT.
And lest anybody thinks this is because we just made a decision to present it a month earlier, it's not. It's a new Department of Education regulation that even though they haven't fully released and unembargoed all their data, that we give the report at this time, or within 60 days of a certain trigger date, which has occurred.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Woods to say a few words.
Thank you, Ms. Jewett. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here tonight. We begin with the vision because it really does serve as the foundation for all the good work you'll hear about tonight, the initiatives, the hard work of the faculty, and the kinds of progress that we're making. At the heart of it, and I've said this before to you, but just as a matter of review, is this culture of inquiry and collaboration, which sets the tone for helping kids learn to ask questions, think critically and creatively, and work together to solve problems. Our culture of acceptance is something that's been, we've made a lot of progress with, and it's very important to us in terms of providing an opportunity for kids to understand and for all of us to understand that there is community in diversity. And this culture of kindness that has become pervasive in the school is creating the kind of environment that we want for our kids to learn and grow. And of course, we also highlight the importance of the arts and athletics and service in our vision for learning. And of course, because this is a 4-year journey for kids and an ongoing process, reflection is important, and of course, ethical decision-making is always important. And together we move forward. And the other important part of the vision, and the nice coincidence, if we want to call it that, is that when we got together 4 years ago to put together the strategic plan, all of the goals that arose when the stakeholders got together just naturally arose from the vision, and we're well aligned, and we continue to move forward in that way. So I'll turn it back to Liz to talk a little bit more specifically about the strategic plan.
So all of the departmental goals that the supervisors will speak to tonight are aligned with each of these goals in the strategic plan. And I probably don't have to remind you of what the overarching topics are of each goal because we have talked about them so much. But the first one is focused on social and emotional wellness. The second goal is focused on planning for post-secondary learning and experiences. And the third one has to do with cultivating creative, innovative, and interdisciplinary learning experiences for our students while they're here at Watchung Hills. So some of our areas of focus this year around those strategic plan goals on a district-wide level have to do with our continued focus on wellness. And I was really pleased to hear a staff member a couple weeks ago in a meeting actually ask about our next strategic plan, wanting to make sure that we were going to continue what we've started as a part of this strategic plan, specifically with regard to wellness. So those conversations are already starting to occur, and it's nice to know that folks are already starting to think about that. And you'll actually hear more about those efforts when we talk a little bit about the professional development days, the activities that we had for the 9th graders on the PSAT day. We are going to be doing our wellness day again, as we have done in the past, but we are also taking a little bit different approach with with making it more of an ongoing initiative and trying to weave it more into the daily operation of the district and the classes. With regard to technology, we are continuing our one-to-one initiative. So our current 9th and 10th graders all have Chromebooks, and that was the main focus of our professional development last week. On the first day, it was a collaborative day with our 4 K-8 districts, and Mrs. Phelan will speak a little bit about that in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. But the second day was just Watchung Hills, and the whole focus was instructional technology. And there were sessions on everything from Newsela and Albert I.O., which are online platforms for differentiated instruction that you will also learn about more about later in the presentation, to using Turnitin.com as a way, as one of the tools we're using to implement and strengthen our work around our integrity guidelines. And now I'll turn over to Mr. Alexis, who's actually going to speak a little bit more about that.
Last year, as you know, we assembled an integrity committee made up of teachers, a vice principal, and one of our supervisors. It was chaired by one of our teachers, Shelley Leddington, and one of our supervisors, Jim Aquavia. And they spent a lot of time meeting regularly throughout the spring and making recommendations for improving our integrity guidelines. Over the summer, we got feedback from other stakeholders and the administrative team, and we ended up coming up with a terrific set of new guidelines that are helping kids understand the importance of academic honesty in their work and the role it plays in their learning throughout their 4 years and well into their adulthood and beyond. The other thing that I'd like to acknowledge is the good work of Mr. McConnell and Mrs. Angelastro in terms of embracing the class, the freshman class. Each year we make adjustments to some of the opportunities we have to help parents and students learn about the high school. In particular, the curriculum night has changed over the last couple of years and has the 8th grade orientation in April each year. When we have our freshman orientation the day before school, kids get another chance to come and run through their schedules. On PSAT day, we have an opportunity to provide mini workshops and seminars for kids. This year they learned about code.org. They had some mindfulness training. They also had Naviance training with the counselors, and then they all assembled in the pack for a speaker who talked a little bit about diversity, acceptance, giving your best effort, and the importance of integrity in your life. And then last, I'm just going to mention, because we have talked for the last number of years about promoting a culture of inquiry and collaboration, and we continue to do that. One of the professors from JMU who was here last Monday did a terrific workshop on problem-based learning, and that's something that we've been incorporating in our instructional program for the last number of years, and we remain committed to that. We also include the professional learning communities, which we redesigned last year and made adjustments to this year to make them a little bit more instructionally focused and giving teachers an opportunity to work together with people in their department. While some folks still are doing interdisciplinary work, the feedback we got was that teachers would like to work with folks that teach the same courses or grade levels. And we're off to a fast start, much further along than we were last year. I know the teachers are looking forward to tomorrow afternoon. And so I mention that because it's also an excellent opportunity for the faculty to model problem-based learning for the students. And then we're going to start this student performance data, and Ms. Phelan and Mr. D'Alessio will join me once I just briefly mention a couple of things. Jed did a great job of going over the National Merit Scholars, and a couple of things to point out, like Jed did, that we had 48 semifinalists over the last 5 years. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see that over the course of 5 years, we've had 256 recognized students, which is really, again, more evidence of the great work that the faculty and staff are doing with our students. The other nice thing to point out is that in the finalist column for the last 3 years, the semifinalists, 100% of the semifinalists have moved to the finalist stage, and we're hopeful that the 6 semifinalists this year will also move forward. This is a slide we shared with you last year because it looks at the old SAT, and it shows a pattern and a trend from the 2012 SAT to the 2016 class of 2016. And you see that we went up 58 points, but you also see that the state average went down 19 points, so for a net increase of 77 points which is statistically significant. With the new test, last year we had a total score of 1209. This year it's gone up to 1250. And while it is unofficial because we haven't gotten the documentation from the College Board, Mr. Twizzler has run these numbers, and they've proven to be very accurate in the past. This is a look from last year to this year, the bar graph from 1209 to 1250. And the ACT also this year with a 26.5 composite, although that's unofficial, it is the highest average we've had over the course of time. And if you go back to 2013, we only had 250 test takers, and now for the class of 2018, we had 312, about a 25% increase in the number of test takers, and the number continues to go up. I'll turn this over to Mr. DeLessio to talk a little bit about Park.
Good evening. So the next slide is about our Park data. Park is the state test for college and career readiness in both math and English language arts. For mathematics, it's broken up into classes or subject areas: Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. And this year we had over 98% participation in these tests, which in years past we haven't, but this year we had good participation. And again, our results showed that we're steadily climbing up in our Park results in all mathematics courses. We're also required to break down our subgroups. And the subgroup we have in district is a special education subgroup. This shows the percent of students who met or exceeded expectations, both in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. You'll see general ed on the first, excuse me, or the second column. Third column is our special ed population, and all students statewide who've met or exceeded expectations, which is a level 4 or 5 score on these tests. ELA is the English language arts, and that's grade specific throughout the states. So we have 9th, 10th, and 11th graders taking that test. And again, we've seen progress with our 9th and 10th graders and 11th graders. Again, we had a large participation rate of over 90% with 11th graders and over 98% with 9th and 10th. And we also reporting out on our subgroups there. So again, the second column is our general education students, percent who've met or exceeded expectation. That's a level 4 or 5, followed by our special ed population and all students statewide. Again, good progress there. I'm going to ask Mr. Twizzler and Mr. Aquavia to come up and talk a little bit about the pedagogy as it relates to the testing.
So the Park assessment measures students' mastery of the standards. Our assessments are units of study. Our instruction is aligned to the standards very directly. We work as a department and we work in small groups to take the data that we have from a variety of assessments to inform our instruction. So a very helpful tool that we have to do that is we get a chart back from the Department of Education that lists out all of the standards that have been assessed on the Park. And we're able to see how our students compare with their peers across the state. And so we use that information to identify where we have done well and areas where we would like to continue to improve. We work as a department in that way. We work in small teams in that way as well. And we're starting to use resources to help us address the particular areas that we find that we'd like to continue to grow. So one of the areas where we would certainly like to continue to grow is in our integration of nonfiction, historical nonfiction, but scientific and technical articles as well. And so resources like Newsella help us to do that. And we call upon other digital resources to help us with that as well.
In math, one of our biggest gains was that last year we asked all students to bring in their own calculator. And with access to that, the students are now starting to get a lot more comfortable with the technology that they're going to have access to in the park. We even have teachers taking advantage of the sample park test to be able to offer a digital calculator to students that did not purchase one on their own as an alternative way to be able to get access to that. That's also going to help us down the road for the SAT, because the SAT now has one section that's mandatory non-calculator and one section that's mandatory calculator. So as we build fluency in our students with calculator use, it's going to help them in all their standardized tests. The school also purchased access to Problematic. Problematic is a resource to be able to get test questions, and some of the questions that they have on that site are park materials. So we have teachers that are using those as do now activities or incorporating them in worksheets to get the students used to actual park style questions. Like Mr. Okweve just pointed out, we have access to the evidence statements. The evidence statements offer a wonderful map of what areas our students excel at and which ones they did not. Unfortunately, the coding on park can be a little bit cumbersome, but luckily I have a spreadsheet that I got from Somerville Schools that correlates each of the questions on park to which Common Core standard they're aligned to make it a little bit more readable to know what topics our students really need that help on. As was also mentioned earlier, Albert.io is software the school is available now. They have a full math catalog, which gives our students the ability to have differentiated instruction. With access to the Chromebooks in the classroom, students can now work on content at their own speed when there's time in class to do so. The special ed population has also been using IXL to do similar tasks in those classrooms.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. As you can see, our AP students continue to excel as well. Our student representatives gave some overview tonight about how well our students are doing. This year, we wanted to point out the increase, particularly for the number of fives from 2000 to 2018. And also something that the teachers are very proud of is the decrease in the number of ones. In this particular slide, nationally, the number of students with scores of 3 or higher, and the Watchung Hill students are continuing to grow and learn, as you can see. Teachers are working to ensure that students continue to receive 21st century skills and instruction and practice. This is an overview of all the tests that we give, and we're particularly proud of our teachers and our students. As you can see, the district-wide goal of 4.0 has been reached and exceeded. In terms of the 5-year summary, we wanted to point out the number of 4s that our students are receiving, and also the number of tests that our students are taking. This is particularly impressive because in other schools, AP scores and the number of tests vacillate much more than they have at Watchung Hills. I know this is a personal favorite of many of the board members because this points out the AP scholars, and particularly in 2018. Again, you see what an impressive year all the collaborative community working together was able to produce. And now I'd like to introduce Kathy Angelastro, Director of Guidance.
Hi, everybody. So the chart you're looking at gives us the past few years' history of college attendance. You're going to note that for this past graduating class, we have just about 80% of our students attending 4-year colleges, 20% just about 2-year colleges. I want you to note, because this information is taken in June of the student senior year through the Naviance program. So this percentage reflects where students have told us they're going to go and where we send final transcripts. And I know we get a little confused because come December, there's a clearinghouse report, excuse me, that might be totally different than our 80%. It might go down to maybe, I'm gonna go 70, let's say 70%. And that some of the factors that are involved in that and why there's a difference is things do change from June until December. That report does come out in December. Students decide they might not be able to attend, financial. There's also a FERPA that needs to be signed, and students don't realize that. So this percentage you're seeing is based on our records in June through student information on where to send their final transcripts. We've tried to get information from students on how they're doing post-high school alumni information. This year we did hold a reverse college day where we did have a lot of alumni students come, and we ran programs for juniors and seniors. When the students came, the alumni came to that program, we did ask for personal emails so that we could develop a survey to send them this past year, which we did. Out of the, let's say, 150 emails, only 30 students responded. So survey, you know, I know everybody was excited that day to see everybody, and yes, they'll, oh yeah, absolutely, we'll do a survey. So we only got 30%. So 30 students that answered. One of the goals in the guidance department that goes along with the strategic plan is students do have a guidance requirement for graduation. So the guidance department is going to be trying to develop a survey through Naviance that we can customize to reflect what the strategic plan is. In other words, when for some of you who went to the strategic plan meeting when we first started 4 years ago, one of the top concerns that I remember was, do the students have a trusted adult in the building that they can talk to, someone they can go to? Excuse me. So one of the questions on the survey will probably be, did you find someone in the building that you can talk to, that you feel trusted? And we can customize it to the input we get from everybody as we develop it, and then that will be a requirement before the seniors graduate so that we don't have 30 responses. Maybe we'll get 450 to 500 responses. So that is one of the things guidance will be working on this year. The next slide you see is a sample of some of the colleges that our students highlighted, some of the colleges where our students were accepted and were attending. So you see two numbers there in parentheses, and I really can't see the first one. Boston College, what are the two numbers there?
10 and 3.
So 10 students applied, 3 students were accepted. So in each college, this just shows you how many actually applied, I'm sorry, how many were accepted and how many are going, my mistake. How many were accepted, so at Boston College, 10 were accepted, 3 are attending this year. So that is information based on this year's seniors. And you can see the variety of colleges, and these are only some of the colleges that our students are attending. If you go to the guidance website, there's a report on the class of, and that will give you more detailed information for all the colleges the students have applied to and their acceptances. And next, Mrs. Phelan will be talking.
Bob, you have a question?
Oh.
I was just curious, you know, since we're about to move into a different section of the presentation, whether or not we would want to have any questions regarding the presentation of the data versus the presentation of department goals.
Yeah, I agree that that's what we should do. I just wasn't sure whether or not you wanted to cover professional learning first and then have a few questions.
I defer to you.
So Mary Ellen, if you would come back, please.
Unfortunately, Beth is not able to be with us tonight, but she and I did a lot of work together over the last 6 months for professional learning. And we began meeting with the supervisors of the 4 sending districts last June to begin the preparation for October 10th. October 8th. And the first day, we had over 600 offerings. We used an Eventbrite operation this year, invitation, and teachers were very positive about having some time to think about it over the weekend. We opened it on a Friday, and then the following Monday they signed up. They were able to reach out to their colleagues in the other schools as well as in this school to see if they wanted to plan their day together. So Beth really gets a lot of credit. Board members, when you see her, she worked through people who were out and wanted to email her Sunday night. She got an email at 11 o'clock at night. She was able to find the first choices for most of our teachers. If you remember the highlights of professional learning, we've made some references already this evening. The first one is when we welcome our new staff, just like we welcome our freshmen. And this year we had a very energized group who participated for 3 days from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock every day. Then we had our 2 opening days in September where we welcomed everyone, and we had a keynote speaker, and we were focused again on technology and wellness. And then October 8th, as Liz said, we did the 5 schools together. Most of the sessions were up here, and then on October 9th, we focused on technology. George made a reference to Eric Carbauer, who came and gave a keynote on how teenage brains are changing because of all the technology, Freddie. We also had faculty members present on the 9th. Sean New did a wonderful job, and the survey just went out to the teachers, so the board will be hearing results. But please compliment Beth, because she really paid a lot of attention to many details. We listened to feedback from teachers about they wanted a teacher to do a keynote, and we received a lot of positive affirmation about he really understood project-based learning. So thank you.
And now we have had quite a bit of data thrown at us, so I'm going to ask board members if you have any questions on the presentation thus far. Go ahead, Greg.
Seeing no one volunteering. So in the data that was presented, and regardless of how one feels about the PARCC test and where that's going, at least from my experience on the K through 8 as well as here, I'm accustomed to seeing a fair difference between how we score versus state average, and things that just struck me during this presentation. Obviously math, algebra 1, where that's not the case, and even algebra 2, where we were fairly similar and barely stronger than the state. And then 11th grade ELA, if someone could comment about why that may be, if there is an explanation, and how might that be mitigated in the future.
So I'll share some details, and then if Dan or Jim want to add to that. So Algebra 1, because we are a regional high school district, the only students that take the Algebra 1 test here are our students who struggle in math. So our scores are never going to match up to the state, because the majority of students will have taken Algebra 1 in middle school. So they're counted with their scores. Okay. And the same thing actually is true for geometry. The students who took geometry in the middle school, again, they'll have taken the geometry part while they were in middle school. So those are the top performing math students who aren't actually counted in our scores. And then on the other side, the same thing with the students who are in pre-calc and higher don't take any PARCC test. With Algebra 2, the same thing with ELA 11, those are the juniors. And because here they've already taken the PSAT, because we do offer it to all 10th graders, they have already met the requirement as the testing requirement for high school graduation. So while this is our perception, and we don't have, it's more anecdotal, we do feel that most of the 11th graders did not take the test that seriously, because they had already met the graduation testing requirement prior to taking it. So that is part of the trouble. Now, we still do look at the breakdown of the data, but it's troublesome for us to make generalizations of it because of that reason. Because we have students who opt out, we have students who, by 11th grade, they've met the testing requirement, because they can, up until now, they've been able to meet one of those alternative testing requirements, PSAT, SAT, and because all of our students take the PSAT in 10th grade, those students have met the requirement. So that's why we run into a bit of a problem, why it's hard to look at the comparative data.
So does that same apply to Algebra 2, where the difference is very small, and I assume that's all our students in this school?
Mhm.
And with respect to your geometry comments, if my recollection is correct, it's really a small percentage of folks that take geometry in the 8th grade.
It is small, but it
compared
would be the top math students, so their scores aren't going to be factored in, whereas for a K-12 district, every student who's taking the geometry park, whether they're in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, they're all counted together, whereas we don't have those accelerated students counted in our scores because they took the test in middle school. So that's why it's hard to compare, which is why we look also to compare our performance with other regional high school districts, because it helps. We do actually have, we did contract with IDEX to help us do that, but the state hasn't released all of that data publicly for other school districts yet, so we're not able to have the comparative data. But that's something that we were saying we can follow up and share with Ed Committee and share with the full board as well, if the board would like that. And Dan, if either you or Jim want to add.
I very much agree with everything that Ms. Jewett just said. I just wanted to add in the fact that with our Title I funds, we focused most of our energy on Algebra 1 Park this year, with the idea of knowing that it's a weaker population of students, so we're trying to aggressively help them to try and shore up that gap as best we can.
Just as a follow-up, don't go away. As a follow-up, have we looked, when we've looked at the other regionals in the past, you know, I know we don't have the data currently, but do other regionals show the same kind of trends that we're showing regarding, you know, the 11th grade as well as, you know, Algebra 1?
I know all high schools actually have a lot of high schools, especially ones who have a lot of students enrolled in AP English because they actually didn't have to sit for the 11th grade park test. So in terms of math, Dan, you might be able to speak to the comparison.
It's quite frankly, their numbers are better, but if you look a little bit deeper, you realize they have a smaller proportion of students taking the test. So if they are only hand-picking which students are sitting for the exam, they're going to get better numbers. As was mentioned earlier, we had over 98% of our students sit for the exam, and that's going to adapt our numbers a little bit. It's our full population, not a hand-picked population, to try and make the numbers look right.
How do you hand-pick to take the park test?
Well, a lot of schools allow students to opt out. So if they're allowing students to opt out, that changes their numbers. So even if they're not hand-choosing them, it's still a smaller proportion of students.
I'm not aware of schools that allow students to opt out, and actually as it relates to students opt out, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
And parents choose to opt out their students, but I'm not aware of schools that have a policy to allow students to opt out because that's against state policy.
I think it's just more it's just more,
right, that's fine.
It's just I think Dan's speaking to the practice in different districts in terms of how, I guess how much they accommodate the students who are who decide to refuse to take the test. And we had among the highest percentage of participation in the test across across a lot of districts in the state. Actually, I would say across most districts in the state. We are hoping that with the proposed changes to park testing in terms of scaling back the time, which they're planning on doing for this year, and there's also the proposals to actually decrease the number of tests in high school, we are hopeful that the students will then take it more seriously because it won't be as much of their time, they won't be tested as much, they will be taking them earlier in high school before they get to their AP testing and SATs and everything else that they're going to be more focused on. So we're actually hopeful that the data in the future will be more informative and useful. That's what we're looking towards.
And then separately, Mr. Twizzler, you mentioned that you had to go to Somerville to get some sort of alignment to the state standards. I was under the impression that the state was actually providing reports that showed the specific standard alignment and then how your school did on a particular standard versus the state kind of laid out in a grid. Is that not what you're getting?
No, it's not. I mean, you're partially correct. They break it down by standards on the test. So the test has its own grid as to how all these different items play out, but they do not align to New Jersey standards. So you have to go through an extra step to be able to find resources to show you what the problem looks like. So Excel document that I have access to is a map to the park open resources where they showed sample questions to give greater ideas to what the question looks like, as opposed to just what the words are. But there's an extra hoop to be able to go through to be able to get to the actual standards.
Great.
But you're right, it does break it down item, question by question.
And just so board members are aware, moving forward, we will no longer be referring to them after this year as park assessments. They will be the New Jersey end of course assessments for English language arts and for Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, just like the Common Core standards are now the New Jersey student learning standards. So they won't look that different from what they were previously, just like the New Jersey learning standards are very similar to the Common Core, but we've renamed them.
Same great taste, new packaging, right?
And Mr. Morrison and Ms. Ober and I were at a presentation last week by Barry Ehrlichson at school boards, where, Bob, I wasn't as sure that she was talking about years in the past, but my impression definitely was that this current park information that the school is getting, although some of it's still embargoed, is going to have the kind of information you were asking about, that aligned questions and where they, or lack of performance with specific state standards. Mm-hmm. And so that is something that we do need to follow up on.
I'm sorry, Greg, before you...
Please.
Yes.
I would just underscore what Superintendent Jewett said about many of our 11th graders for ELA having made the graduation testing requirement. And I do think that affects their attitude toward the assessment. We see very different results in last year's 9th graders assessment and the distance we see between our present 10th graders and their peers across the state. And I think their attitude toward the assessment was considerably different, and we see different results there.
Thank you.
So that I'm clear in understanding, so an interpretation is that there are subsets that are taking this test that may not be reflective of the whole population of students. And I think I heard a comment that said that if you take an AP test, you don't have to take a certain segment of park. Are students told that or not? And do we actually know the numbers that actually take it or decide not to take it?
It's just for ELA 11 that's one of the ways that you can that you can be exempt from the requirement to take the test. We did not, our goal was to get as much participation as possible, because despite the fact that that is a reason that they can that they can be exempt from the testing requirement, it does not exempt us as a district from the participation requirement that the state holds us to. And so we have to then put a corrective action plan in place when we don't meet that participation requirement. So it's almost like one office doesn't talk to the other, because the two requirements contradict each other a bit. I'm hopeful with the proposed changes that they're going to clean all of that up a bit, which is part of the reason they're looking to scale the testing back to earlier in high school, just because students end up with so many other testing requirements in junior and senior year with regard to college entrance tests and AP tests and those types of things.
So would the park test be more reflective of the gen ed student versus over the AP student?
In terms of, you mean their performance on the test?
Their performance and the way they're graded within the presentation, or within the way the numbers are shown.
It's hard to say, because we'd have to look individually. It really depends on how seriously the student took the test. I would say that what Mr. Acquavia alluded to, that for our younger students, for our 9th grade students, last year's performance is more reflective of their actual performance, because I think they definitely took that more seriously than the older students, because they were under the impression that it was going to be a graduation requirement. And that makes a big difference. If it's a test that you have to pass to graduate from high school, you're going to take it more seriously when you sit for the test. So that, I would say, I don't know in terms of the level of student that I can make that generalization, but I would say from our results that we do feel it's more reflective of the 9th graders' actual performance.
So I appreciate the interpretation, but I guess I would feel uncomfortable assuming that that interpretation is correct, because I could interpret it a different way. I could say, ninth grade, there's a bigger disparity, 10th grade, there's less, and 11th grade, it's gone, and we're failing along the way. And so before I would assume that 11th graders are saying, I don't need to take this seriously, I mean, I can't speak for every student. I can tell you that the students that I know that are high performers, they take every test seriously, whether it counts or it doesn't count. So I would be worried about assuming that unless there's data that shows that, because there are other interpretations of this data.
I do not disagree with what you're saying, and that is one of the struggles we have with using the PARCC data, which is why we look at a cross-section of data until we know that the PARCC data is more reliable and valid. So that's why we do look also at grades and at AP test scores and SAT scores of those classes to see where the gaps might be. And in terms of you know, how we're looking at grades, one of the things that we're doing this year is, and correct me if I'm wrong, did we put the PARCC scores in, whether they were proficient or not, in Genesis? We do. So we did put that as a field in Genesis. The reason being, we want the teachers to have an awareness, because if a student, you know, was not proficient in PARCC and they're doing really well in my class, in my math class, I can have a conversation with them. You know, is it because you just had a bad day? Did you just not take the test seriously? Did you have anxiety taking the test? So, you know, is it a test taking issue? And on the flip side, if a student did really well on the PARCC test and I see that they're floundering a bit in my class, that's another conversation to have. So that is another data point we're looking at to see if we can figure out why that disparity is, if it's genuinely because of a deficiency in the student's skills and that they need assistance, or if it was because of something associated with the test and the logistics around the test. So that, you know, that I would say is the biggest struggle we've had over the past couple of years, is how to effectively use the data and even the comparative data, because every school context around this test is so different in terms of, you know, how many students are actually taking it, how they're testing the students, how they're preparing the students, but the participation rates of school districts vary so widely that it's hard to look at that comparative data and draw conclusions from it. So that's why we have to look at multiple data points, which we should continue to do regardless.
Is there anything, particularly as it relates to ninth grade Algebra 1, is there anything that can be done in working with the sending districts to maybe, if we see that as a, you know, as an area for some attention, to encourage some attention occurring earlier in the process? And, you know, I mean, to what degree do we know what's happening below that contributes to?
I think I'm going to call on Mr. Twizzler to speak to that, because the articulation with the sending districts for math is something that I know you have been actively working on.
We have been actively working on it, and I feel like we're in a good spot there. The sending districts are more open to me coming down to visit them. They're open this year to their teachers coming up to visit our classrooms, to have a really good thoroughfare back and forth between the two. And I think we are in a state now where we can talk about the resources they're using and the way that they're teaching Algebra 1 to try and get better alignment.
The other point to Greg's question about what can we do, we're looking very carefully at testing the Algebra 1 students and the ELA 10 students with their teachers in their classrooms. Because one of the data points that we have discussed is we know our kids also are pleasers, and when they're anonymous in a cafeteria, for example, they have more of a propensity to open and close, perhaps, or open and stare, perhaps, whereas if there are 21 students in a classroom with a teacher that has worked very hard with them. And Dan and I had a Title I meeting this afternoon, and the parents were very grateful. We got follow-up emails which actually said it's the first time we feel like our students are going to have someone address their gaps. So we share your concern when we look at the data as well.
Just one other comment to kind of piggyback, Peter, on your reference to the county meeting. The meeting that we attended was focused on the board's role in improving academic outcomes for students. So how does the board and the administration partner to focus to achieve positive student outcomes? And there was a tremendous amount of really rich and useful information that came out of that presentation. Dr. Erlichson did the presentation, and given the fact that we're front-loaded on the results and we really haven't had a chance to look at this at Ed Committee like we would have historically done it, I think at the next Ed Committee meeting it would be great to discuss some of those things and maybe provide the committee with a little bit more visibility on what we're seeing as it relates to where strengths may be and where some gaps are, so that they can have a better understanding of it as well, and then that works to inform how the board can be a better partner in working with the administration to ensure that we're addressing the needs of all of our students.
That's great. And I would encourage any other board members, if as you review the presentation, if you have additional questions that you would like us to follow up on in the Ed Committee, just either let me or Bob know.
Greg?
Moving on to a different topic in the same location, the acceptance and matriculation slide. Do we know and I assume that we do, what students are applying to what schools? Because I assume that we're writing letters of recommendation for them.
It's all in Naviance, I believe. It's tracked. Yes.
So things that I would find informative in this specific slide is not just acceptance and matriculation, but application. So how many apply?
It's on the college report. So if you go to the guidance, there's class of 2018, and it says how many applied. This is just the short version. How many applied, how many were accepted, and how many were attended. Not the names, just the college. So
Sure.
Boston College may have had 34 apply, 10 were accepted, and 4 going. So it's not on this side, but it is on the guidance side. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then second, when I look at this slide, I hark back to early days on the board where certain board members were looking at how do we get everybody to Harvard, which obviously is unrealistic, but this slide is a slide of reach schools, and we have a broad population of students, and I would also be curious that not top tier reach school, how do we do there for our population? Again, what's the application rate, acceptance rate, matriculation rate? It would just be, I think, useful information.
We can actually follow up. Is that some information you'd like us to follow up on as well, with in terms of
up to the president as to what priority that hit.
No, I think it is available to us on the guidance website, but.
Oh, yeah, so these are selections from schools that are on there. What I'll do is when I send out my Friday highlights, I'll put a link to that, just so that it's easy for everyone to access.
Thank you.
Easy enough.
Okay, move on now.
So I stopped between Beth's two slides, so I thought it would be just a little bit better transition, because English people care about transitions, Peter. So before we introduce the supervisors, one of the things that I think you should feel good about, again, kind of closes this section of the presentation, and it goes right back to what Liz and George began with. And that's the alignment with the mission statement, then the strategic plan, and then the goals for professional development and professional learning. And all of us believing in Carol Dweck's growth model.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Aquavia will begin with English. They're in alphabetical order.
So English department highlights for the past school year. We ran 2 4-day college application essay workshops over the summer. 30 students attended, drafted personal essays to send along with their applications. We also presented an evening college essay workshop attended by approximately 100 students. It opened with a senior symposium, students talking about their college application essay experiences and insights, followed by breakout sessions for the juniors to start reading sample essays and generating ideas for their own essays. We are proud to point out that in its second year of operation, the co-president of the speech and debate team was selected for USA Debates Development Team. We're proud to have a Watchung Hills Junior selected by the National Council of Teachers of English as one of 19 juniors in the state of New Jersey recognized last year with a certificate for superior writing. Current highlights, we're excited that Hillary Ryle will visit Watchung Hills tomorrow. She'll talk with us about writing as a profession and about her novel, Kids Like Us, Watchung Hills School-Wide Read this year. And we look forward to bringing 20 students this Friday to the Dodge Poetry Festival at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. Our goals for the department for this year, we want to strengthen students' analytical writing by providing timely, high-quality feedback and opportunities throughout the year to reflect on growth. English teachers have already engaged in professional learning to strengthen feedback and prompt student reflection and greater ownership of their writing. We want to sharpen students' attention as readers and deepen engagement with text by facilitating student-centered discussion. This goal is a deliberate move toward fostering greater authenticity in dialogue in the classroom. We want to expand our use of instructional technology also to strengthen literacy skills by using resources like Newsela to differentiate instruction, particularly in CP English classes. We'll also continue to expand our use of Chromebooks in the classroom to support literacy skills. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Ms. Falvo is up next to talk with you about social studies.
Because we're going to abandon the alphabetical order. No, you're scheduled. I'm teasing Mariella.
Yeah, I don't know. Someone I wrote a meeting for many years. About English people not knowing the alphabet. Fair enough. Okay, good evening. I wanted to talk to you also about our highlights and our goals for next year. What we have been doing a lot in social studies is working on a lot of authentic learning and application. I've told you before that we've moved away from just rote memorization, and we're getting kids to really think, taking stances, using historical thinking skills. So we're doing a lot of authentic learning in the department, and all the teachers are on board with that. We have some new things that we worked on last year. There's a big push in New Jersey to promote civic education. And so we're looking at doing that within the department right now in the courses that we have available. But we're also getting our students involved. We actually had 2 voter registration drives, one at the end of last year, one at the beginning of this year, where we work with the New Jersey Council of Social Studies, and we actually had members of the League of Women Voters who came to help the students. Last year, a lot of students can register when they do their driver's license. We found out that not all of them do. We were able to register 77 students last year and 51 this year. So, and that's just at lunchtime. So within like a 40-minute period, we were able to register a lot of our students to vote. We're also doing a lot with cultural acceptance as part of our wellness initiative. 2 of our teachers, Ms. Sack and Ms. Lott-Jones, did a video for Close Up Classroom last year on Islamophobia, and they have been chosen as the candidates or the video to be on NJTV this year. They're interviewed with that, and it's student based. You'll see, I don't think in this picture, but in one of the pictures I have next, you'll see that video being done. And we did a nice, Ms. Ludington and Dr. DiGiovanna ran our summer school study skills program this year, which they have some of the 9th graders that took the class, and they're benefiting quite a bit from that. So this year, like a lot of the other departments are saying, we're going to continue to infuse technology. We are using Newsela, and I know you've heard about that a couple times tonight. Essentially, that provides articles from all the disciplines, and you can modify it for the different lexile or reading levels of all the students. So they'll be reading the same article, but based on their reading level. So they'll get the content, and they'll also develop the skills from that. Albert.io provides good literacy assignments. It's good for our AP students because it gives sample questions of all the different AP courses.
And all of our students have access to that, so they have a subscription. We also have 50,000 primary source documents for American history from Gilder Lehrman. We are continuing to get our free subscription from the New York Times, which has, of course, a lot of available resources for us. And we have the New York Times Upfront magazine, both online and in print. So a lot of we get 30 copies, and a lot of the teachers use the Chromebooks to do a lot of those things there. We're developing, expanding learning styles of our students, but we really want to focus on a topic that's been sort of something we've talked about in the last couple of years, the quality of homework over the quantity of homework. And we're kind of weaving through our assignments to make sure that what we give our students is meaningful to them. And that also, actually all of what I said kind of focuses on our kind of overarching goal of increasing literacy in social studies, and then hopefully the skills that we teach will cross over to other disciplines as well. So now Mr. Comerford.
Thank you, Anita.
Hello, good evening. In PE last year, we were taking a look at how to enhance and help the ninth graders acclimate to the world of the high school. And we brought in various resources that we do have already here at school. One of them, for example, is the peer leadership. They come in and they do icebreaker activities with the students, show them literally the building, because it can be very difficult to maneuver this building, particularly with the numbering. They do get lost, and it is overwhelming when you first walk in here. So there is that need to acclimate as to the actual physical size of the building. And of course, also they speak to what the expectation is for being a student in the high school. Excuse me. The diversity club also comes in. They speak about bullying and the expectations for appropriate behavior in the school. And we also have outside community resources that come in. For example, ninth grade, they talk about consent and dating. 10th grade, they talk about distracted driving. In 11th grade, they talk about stress and coping mechanisms. And in 12th grade, healthy relationships. Where's the slide? Is that the slide? There we go. One of the other highlights was authentic performance-based assessments. We had Dr. Brent Hydorn come in from the University of West Georgia, and his expertise is assessing performance in target and outdoor activities. The idea behind it was to demonstrate emphasis on skill development and how we could assess our students in their effort in the PE classroom. And that, to that end, the teachers worked on creating their own performance-based assessments throughout the year. That started last year and it continues into this year as well. Another thing, speaking to the wellness curriculum that we have here, is integrating the resources in our health and PE curriculum to talk about wellness curriculum in general. So for example, Minding Your Mind is a group of professionals that come in to the building, and they will be here tomorrow and Thursday, as a matter of fact. They were here last year and they're back again this year. And they provide mental health education to adolescents with the goal of reducing the stigma of distracted behaviors that are associated with mental health issues. Our department goals for this year are to align the curriculum in our curriculum with the K-8 districts, get a better idea of what is actually taking place in the K-8 programs, particularly with the idea of performance assessments. We're also talking about goal setting. That is a particular unit that exists in the health curriculum, but it also extends to PE and of course every other content area. So to learn how to set goals, what that means, and how you go about changing your goals if you need to. And then finally, promoting recreational play, and you can see from the photo that is there, the Project Adventure. We just got off of a Project Adventure training with the staff, so they could learn how to help the students learn to collaborate and effectively maneuver the different events that they have in real time, and learning coordinating group activities. In world languages, we are in our second year of the World Seal of Biliteracy. This is a form of assessment that is performance-based. So the students take a test, as you know, from any one of the number of assigned New Jersey state assessment programs, and they either achieve the score or they don't, but they end up getting a certificate from the state of New Jersey that indicates that they have an intermediate level of understanding in the world language, which is a relatively high level for 4 years of study, or 6 years if they're coming from middle school with a program. Last year we had 50 recipients of this program. World Language Honor Society is the academic end of that performance. We have many more students that academically perform very, very well in our world language programs, and that speaks to our very high grades in the AP scores that we had this year. We're very proud of those. But that is the one that most of our students, you're required to have a minimum of a 90 average in order to participate, and many do. Italian cultural studies was something new that we had last year, and this was born out of the idea of looking for alternative pathways for our students to study world languages, particularly faced with declining enrollment. What could we do to keep students in the world language programs, particularly when world languages becomes an elective after your second year of study? And this really fell on Patty Grunther. She was the force behind this, and really all the credit goes to her for coming up with this, and we hope to be able to extend this to other languages in the future. We continue talking about teaching without a textbook. We began that last year, and we're continuing with it this year. And that led to the virtual language lab that we began last year, and we are instilling again this year, which, you know, we no longer have the physical space, but we do now have the capability of doing it virtually. Departmental goals. We're taking a look at integrated performance assessments, particularly since we have teaching without the textbook. So in order to be able to align all of the world language programs with integrated performance assessments, so across the board, we're doing the same sorts of assessment, looking for the same types of proficiency. We're also looking at sheltered instruction observation protocol because we have a changing demographic happening. We have more and more students coming in that are not, that are taking English language instruction as ESL students. So a lot of them are coming in the lower levels, which is word level or sentence level, and they're not able to acclimate to our general curriculum. So we need to provide instruction, and this is more of a PD event for our professional staff to understand what it is that goes into giving instruction, delivering curriculum to students that are limited English capability. All right? This originally came from the Center for Applied Linguistics in California, and it's called Sheltered English Observation Protocol to help those students learn their content according to their linguistic abilities. And then finally, we're using the use of technology to modify our assessments. Again, this reads to teaching without a textbook and that virtual language lab. Once we get that rolling, we'll be able to test our students effectively outside the classroom setting from home.
Thank you.
Math and business, Mr. Twizzle.
Well, again, math and business are both working on the idea of trying to tear down some silos, trying to open up the doors a little bit to the outside world, and also integrate some technology. Like Mr. Patelli's lovely picture of the calculator in my office. So it's interesting, Mr. Comfort just pointed out that one of the things that Health and PE was doing with the freshmen was trying to give tours, because as much as the pre-Frosh this past summer enjoyed our summer classes, one of their favorite things was getting tours of the school. Both in the math class and the coding class, they really enjoyed getting their feet in the building and getting acclimated to what was going on. For the hackathon and TEDx events, we had a lot of help from the business department. Mrs. Krutz and her accounting students really provided a back end for both of those events to give the students practice in both project management as well as managing the finances for both of those events. Also in business, we had our students go to Jet Stadium this year for a behind-the-scenes tour of how all the management of the facilities worked. And it was very well received. We were there in multiple other schools, and our students actually got tickets to a Jets game as a follow-up from that. And they successfully went recently, and it was a good time had by all. Also in tearing down silos, the Math League, the test was actually right after a very large storm, and several of the nearby private schools were closed, so they could actually not host the event. And so we opened our doors, and we had some of them come in as well. I think we had about 4 students from outside our district come to our testing that day because we had power and we were up and running, and a lot of other schools did not. So it was really nice to see us kind of opening the doors and sharing with the community a little bit. I had to brag a little bit about these AP scores. We were trending up all over the place. We had more students testing than ever before. We had some higher averages than ever before. Stats 6 years in a row, it's on the increase. And it's really great to see students embracing these courses and coming out to be able to participate. So far as our goals, one of the big things we have in both departments is the idea of trying to get the students to be more active in the classroom. How the students talk to each other, how the students explain their thinking, and hopefully that will trend towards some of the things we were talking about with Park, of having the students be able to explain their thought process, possibly with a word problem, possibly with a classic problem, to be able to justify how they got their solution. Math is no longer just about getting the right answer, it's about the process and the logical thoughts that go into getting there. So far as technology, we are really embracing the calculator. One of the things that was done in that summer workshop, heavily spearheaded by Ms. Seidenberg, is basically calculator labs, activities to have the students understand how to use the device and how to actually use it for algebra instead of just classic solar 4 function that you might pick up at ShopRite. And so we're really looking to integrate that into our algebra classes to give the students the skills they're going to be able to use on the Park or on the SAT. Also, in the technology realm, we have a lot of teachers already embracing the Albert I.O. that I mentioned earlier. Ms. Falvo mentioned that they're using it in their AP classes, and I really have to tip my hat to her. AP Psych had over 700 questions answered in the first 2 weeks of using Albert I.O. Math is not there yet, but we're trying. And we have a lot of teachers that have already set up classrooms, a lot of teachers that have already given assignments to try and embrace that as a medium. Also, as I mentioned before, Problematic is a resource to be able to get Park questions. It's another technology we're using. We're also in the works right now to be able to get ZipGrader as a way to be able to use multiple choice testing in all of our AP classes. Student engagement really follows through with that first point. We are hoping that we can battle the students saying in our geometry classes that they never learned this algebra topic. And part of the logic for that is to have them actually take a greater ownership in what they're doing in the course so that they retain it longer, so that they can use it on our future math classes and they can use it on their large standardized testing. I'd like to introduce Mr. DeLessio again.
Thank you, Dan.
Sure.
So in the science department, I'll be brief. I'll just go right to our highlights for 2017-18. We had successful implementation of literacy across the curriculum. As many of you know, we promote reading by having our 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students read novels over the summer and assess those reading skills during the school year, relate them to our curriculum. We continue to do that. Science students do a lot of competitions outside of the school. Last year we had 2 students selected to the prestigious Governor's School. One student actually presented a research paper at a recent MIT conference from data she came up with from Governor's School. Our Science League results, which are similar to our Math League, were very good for the 2018 season. Our teams are in the core areas of biology, chemistry, and physics. Last year, our Physics C team placed 8th in the state, and high school physics placed 9th. And our department goals for this year include some professional development we had last year, which I believe is the first time we've ever had this type of professional development at Watchung Hills. We had a outside vendor or an outside professional developer come in from the Vernier science company that we use to collect data on our Chromebooks and through computers. We've always had Vernier apparatus in the school, and you may have heard me talk about them several times. But now we are pushing for their use in the with Chromebooks, and we did have to transition our teachers to use a different type of software program called graphical analysis. And I could tell you the feedback I got was it was the best PD they had in a while in terms of science. We're addressing different learning styles for students with a focus on students who find STEAM challenging, so the science and technology and engineering fields challenging, which we do have some students who find that. We continue to expand our course offerings. This year we implemented robotics and a genetics course. We're looking to increase those offerings for next year also. And Mr. Bertelli will be up next.
Thank you, Michael.
Hello. We had a lot to be excited about in the art department last year. In the field of performing arts, we expanded our music offerings, and we made a lot of new courses hopefully opening the door for some more of our students to enroll in the performing arts. First of all, we rewrote the advanced course curriculum to make that an honors offering for our students to kind of balance it out with the wind ensemble honors class in the band. We split up the concert band and made a symphonic band and now moved the concert band for freshmen only. This gives an opportunity for this class to be co-taught, and we now have some pull-out sectional lessons with our band director, Mr. McCullen, and our new music teacher, Mr. Wyatt. And we are extremely excited about the creation of our new music tech lab, which is now about a month old. Not only are students completely engaged in that class, they're having the time of their life, and they are being exposed to all types of music technology, from keyboarding programs to recording programs to ear training programs. And this is all, this instruction is all aided by the GEC module, which keeps the classroom almost 95% silent and all taught through headphones and microphones. So it's pretty impressive, and the kids are, as I said before, loving it, loving every minute of it. As you know, we also completed the construction of our culinary lab, which helped us kind of move the focus more towards culinary arts and provide the students with more authentic experiences in the culinary field. And in visual arts, we moved a step closer to aligning the curriculum to create more pathways up to the top AP level by creating a Sculpture 2 class. Some of our goals this year are to move more in the direction of creating more pathways. Mr. Twizzler, Mr. Comerford spoke about it in PE. We have the same problem with students coming in from the middle school to the arts program, coming from 4 different schools. They have 4 different. Okay. They have 4 different arts experiences, and when they come in as freshmen, it's our job to kind of try to get them all on the same page and then move them forward. So one of our goals is to try to create more pathways, let this freshman know of their opportunities when they come to high school, so they don't fumble around the first couple of years and then aren't able to complete a full track of the arts as well.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm trying to refresh it.
I'd also like to point out that Mr. Denizio is helping out tonight as well. So let's give a nice
It's a great thing about Google Slides, but when you update it, it's not.
Should I continue, or should I take a deep breath? Or?
Please.
Please.
Trying to get back to the actual Google. Yeah. Maybe you can tell us about that photograph of the calculator.
Well, not only are taking pictures of calculators, we also draw calculators as well, and hopefully some of our band students will be writing a new musical piece to the theme of a calculator.
It's okay. Just know board members doesn't quite match the printout you have because it's been updated.
The one we have is updated.
The one you have is updated.
So for performing arts, as I did with the Music Tech Lab last year, I'm going to be soon, next week, going out and researching some of the exemplary dance programs around the state and trying to research how to better provide some dance experiences that would attract more of our students that we know are proficient in dance already. And in the visual arts, some of the goals are going to be to explore more interdisciplinary learning for our students and try to maybe move our video production lab more into the 21st century and utilize that technology there.
Thank you, Dan.
Sorry for interrupting you, Dan.
It's
I'm just
okay.
trying to update it.
And I'd like to now introduce our Director of Special Service, Mrs. Mary Ann Sale.
Hi, good evening. Okay, so last year, Special Services worked to expand their special education parent advisory group. Ms. Janice Perlin is our parent president, and along with, together with Mr. Betty, our transition coordinator, they worked together to create and plan for diverse presentations that would address the needs of all the populations within special services. Last year, the program started with informational sessions and the role of what a parent advisory group is. There was also presentations from Care Plus, focused on students and the use of screens, like how much time they spend on their phones and their computers. Mr. Bird did a presentation for parents regarding technology, Chromebook use, Google Classroom, to help parents understand the technology that we're using here at school and how they can support their students. This year, they're planning for, tomorrow we're having our first CPAC meeting. We have a panel of accountants and family law attorneys coming to talk about financial planning and guardianship for families with students with special needs. They're also planning to have a representative from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation come in to speak, as well as a representative from a local college to talk about college planning and accommodations for students with needs. Mr. Betty, our transition coordinator, has also worked to expand our structured learning experience program, both here at Watch on Hills and in the community. Our new partners in the community, or our new partner in the community, is Pet Supplies Plus in Berkeley Heights. They've opened their doors to allow our students to come and work. We've also returned to TJ Maxx and Home Goods after a short absence. And then here in the building, Mr. Betty's developed a program with Buildings and Grounds, the mailroom, our cafeteria, to provide students an opportunity to experience the world of work when they're not quite ready to go into the community yet, but to get some of those skills that they need, the soft skills that are necessary to go out into the world of work. So they, in the afternoon, they have, with their job coaches, you'll see them working around our building as well. So our Achieve 3000 results, we worked on Achieve 3000 for almost 2 years. And the teachers found the content, they liked the content, and they felt that it was appropriate for our students, and they supported it. However, we did see that there was minimal growth in the program. The students weren't moving forward as quickly as we would have liked them to. And I think the biggest factor is that we had low student engagement. The kids just didn't enjoy using it. And we all know that kids have to be engaged in order to really get them motivated in learning. So we decided that we were going to stop our relationship with Achieve 3000 and move forward with different ideas and thoughts about how we're going to help build student achievement. And finally, the middle school and high school teachers came together. The high school grade 9 special education teachers visited the grade 8 special education classrooms. They observed the classrooms. They got to meet and articulate together about what's happening here at the high school, what the academic expectations are, what's being taught at the elementary level. It was really very successful. Teachers on both sides really enjoyed it, and we're looking to expand that this year. Last year we went to Warren and Greenbrook. This year we're hoping to get to Watchung and Long Hill, and possibly even revisit Long Hill or Warren and Greenbrook as well. So our department goals. So we continue to work to build student achievement. This year it's through greater inter-district articulation. The directors of special services are planning to meet 4 times a year. We discuss programs, student needs. We collaborate on the needs of the students in the K-8 district and how we can then support them when they come to the high school. So while we're all individual districts, we work together to behave like a K-12, to talk about what our needs are across the board. You'll find that the elementary districts are sending, each one has representatives and interesting programs, like there's autism programs and behavioral disabilities programs and learning and language programs in the different districts, and you'll find that the elementary districts are sending students to one another. So we're keeping our students inside our sending community, and then they will come here to the high school. We're working on this year a proposal for a secondary program. Through the K-8, we discuss what the needs of the students are and the programs that are running and who's coming from those programs up to the 9th grade. So we're working on the development of a behavioral disabilities program. We have a population of students that are coming up from grade 8 into grade 9. So we're talking about that and what we can do to meet the needs of that student population. And this year, Mr. Betty is also going to work closely on enhancing the structured learning experience in our transition program through the person-centered approach. So person-centered approach is a program from the Boggs Center out of Rutgers that focuses on It's student strengths and weaknesses. It's student-led and student-centered, and the idea is to have the student lead a panel of their family, their teachers, their case managers, to talk about their strengths and weaknesses in both the academic area and the vocational area. It promotes self-advocacy. It helps. We create a document that students can take with them to their post-secondary endeavors so that they're not starting, the adult service agencies aren't starting from the beginning. They now know a better idea of who these students are, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, what services need to be provided to support them. All right, and thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Any board members have questions on the departmental achievements and goals? Greg?
I just wanted to commend all of the administration for the presentations, and two themes that I saw recurring were coordination communication with K through 8, which is something that has been, I think, a priority of a number of us, and to see that highlighted in multiple different areas is outstanding. And the other is technology integration. You know, obviously we're investing in technology as much as we can, and to see again that as a recurring theme was very pleasing to see. Thank you.
Won't be too long. Again, to Dr. Shabilsky's point, it's great to see the school integrating technology into learning. I just had a question, however, for science. We look back on the 2017 highlights, and we view the increasing trends in AP scores. Not to put anyone on the spot, but do we have a rate opposed to a simple count to see if these increases are due to change in population sizes, or if this is because we have a higher amount?
Can you repeat that again? I didn't hear you.
So yeah, not to put you on the spot, but is there like a rate?
It's never
or
happened before.
A percentage we can, a percentage that we have an increase in trends in AP, students taking AP BC Calc, as opposed to just account? Math. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say science? Yes, math.
Oh.
Not you.
You're no longer off the spot.
You
could answer.
That's why you understand the question.
A couple years late.
So I'll repeat it again. Apologies. So we pointed to the increase in trends in amount of students taking BC Calc. Are these true? You think these trends are due to the increase in population size between the 2017 class and the 2018 class?
Quite honestly, I'm not sure.
Or 2016?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the population of the class. The actual number of the sections that we've been offering has been fairly stationary. Some of it is students in the AB courses deciding that they want to challenge themselves by taking the BC exam. So we do have a fair number of kids that are not sitting in the course that are taking the test, but I'd really have to go back to the numbers to know where the root cause of that is.
All right, thank you.
Anything else, Freddie?
I had a question for humanities and social sciences.
Social studies?
Yeah. Social studies. Sorry, I'm in the college mindset now. Social studies.
You had a category we don't have here at the high school.
So looking back again on the highlights of the prior school year, you pointed to the increase in writing. Let me just pull it up. I'm sorry. There's a lot of sheets here. Here we go. Application of content, and you pointed to writing. Do you think that did you guys, last year, did you utilize maybe like writing workshops or talking to students to improve their writing to formulate the arguments better? Because now being in college, I really understand how writing plays a big role in your success in higher education. So is this something that the department worked on?
Actually, we do a lot of writing in social studies, from document-based questions. We are working on, we do a research paper actually twice a year. The students do, they do one in English in the first semester, and they do a thesis research paper in the second semester with social studies. So we take them through the whole writing process and this is all levels, from CP through AP. And they go from writing a thesis statement to learning how to do an outline, to doing introduction, to providing evidence, and so on. We are constantly working on helping them to build stances. One of the things that we're focusing on this year, the particular essay is an argumentative essay, because we found that students tend to, actually there's two areas that we find that we need to work on with them. Is number one, having them choose an argument, develop a thesis or a stance, and then be able to support it with evidence. So sometimes they have one or the other, and then they don't back it up with supporting evidence. And so we really work on free response questions. I'd say a good percentage of our time in class is working on developing those skills through the content and through outside writing. So yeah, that's always been a big emphasis over the last couple of years, even more so.
And then just a follow-up question on that. Do you think it might be useful for the social science department to maybe have like a writing lab that's similar to the English department? So, because it's hard to really master the skill of writing in a class of 18 to 22 students and one teacher to focus on all their needs.
No, thank you. That's a good question. And I think it is valuable for the social studies department because even with English having in the past a writing lab, our writing is very different. Aside from the research papers that we both do, there's a very different style, a very different kind of writing, and it's often difficult for students to understand going from one subject to the other. And now we're seeing writing in all the other subject areas as well. Science and math and arts are all doing different kinds of writing. So for us to be able to have a time to sort of sit with students, we've actually integrated a lot of peer review with in individual classes. Teachers are actually conferencing individually with students, but that takes a lot of class time away from it, so it's difficult. So to have a writing lab would be very, very valuable for the social studies department. So thank you, that's a good question.
Thank you, Anita. Jim? Yeah, please.
I really appreciate the question coming from someone who's experiencing first-year writing programs. Some of the feedback we've had in the past is that students have good preparation in writing analytically about literature, but sometimes that doesn't line up directly with first-year writing programs in undergraduate institutions. And so this summer, English teachers did some really fine work to bridge that gap and to start to shape topics for senior English classes that are more directly tied to the kinds of writing that students will be expected to do in their first year writing programs. And the professional learning that we had on October 8th was facilitated by the director of first year writing at Montclair State, and so she's helping us with this as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Crabio.
Any other board questions? I would like to thank the superintendent, the principal, the directors of guidance, curriculum and instruction, and special services, and all the supervisors. An excellent presentation, a lot of information for us, a lot for everybody to digest, but thank you very much for a very thorough presentation. I also want to specifically thank all of the members of the WHREA. We as a board know very well that these outstanding achievements that we've heard about tonight would not happen without the dedication and hard work of all the members of the WHREA and our staff, and we are justly proud of you as we are proud of our students. But we really do want to thank and acknowledge you, because we know these wonderful accomplishments that we hear about meeting after meeting wouldn't happen without you people as well. And I also want to thank you for sitting so quietly and respectfully throughout a very long presentation tonight. Having said that, I will allow the supervisors and the people who are here just for the presentation, if you want to leave, you may, and we're going to move on to the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, let them know.
Jed and
she's my ride home. I'm here till she leaves. So, yeah.
Becca doesn't have that problem. No, go ahead. Thank you, Becca.
No, I know.
Okay. Again, thank you for your courtesy throughout that. We are now at the first opportunity for public comment. Ask you to come up, state your name, and if you're not a teacher, what town you're from, and address the board.
Thank you, Ken Cardis, Watchung Hills Regional Education Association President. I know you don't know the protocol, but
you should clap. Those are some good results. Give them a little. The WHREA shares in the achievements of the school, and we really, are fortunate to be here tonight to see these. And I know that Tim is probably upset that it wasn't his night to present the budget, but maybe if you're lucky, Brenda and Alex and Nick and I will be here, and we'll give you a good clap then too, Tim. But we really do want to thank you for your comments in recognizing our role, and I did hear a number of administrators, mentioning specific teachers, especially in a night where you're focusing so much on the achievements of last year, the achievements of the district goals. I heard a lot of commentary in talking about the data and talking about the numbers and what they mean. And I know that that's important, and I know that's important to you in the positions that you're in especially. But I hope that underneath that you will remember the human element of what is really driving a lot of the success of that data, as well as the success of the school and why people want to live in an area like Watchung Hills and the towns surrounding it. And I think a lot of that is the human element of what this school does in its administrators and also in the faculty and staff that's behind me here tonight. And I would once like again to thank you for your consideration in my time here as I speak on behalf of the WHREA tonight in looking at things sometimes beyond the numbers. And if it helps, I'm going to try to break down my comments a little bit into the numbers to make a little bit more of a direct point than perhaps I did last time. And I'm here to speak about the proposed calendar changes for the 2019-2020 school year in the hopes that you'll consider the impact these changes have when voting on the matter tonight. Over the past 2 weeks, we have heard from many of our members, many of whom are here tonight, many of whom are here with families tonight. They've chosen to be here, when they definitely could have been putting children to bed, a couple of whom I can hear are past bedtime. But I'm here to speak for them and to represent the association in the hopes that you will resolve this matter accordingly. The primary issues that we've heard from many of our members regarding the proposed calendar changes are changes that I alluded to last time, and that I've actually gotten direct information from members who have spoken to me, who have shared stories with other members. One member who expressed that they would now lose around $400 of summer income because of those 2 days that they will now be here. Another member expressed that their employer may not ask them to work that entire week or even more for continuity's sake at a very busy time. Another member was actually planning on working at a SAT course that week and will lose thousands of dollars of income because of the loss of that. Another member also mentioned the way in which this will cut into the summer for those who actually work in the school's own extended school year program. And many members shared the concerns about additional childcare costs and what that week would mean without a week of pay that they would otherwise be receiving from the district. One of the members mentioned the numbers range for anywhere from $450 to $700. Somebody today just told me $700+ for that additional week of 2 days for teachers being here. Some colleagues also expressed their concerns about being a way to take children themselves to college. Or even the worst, in what somebody actually mentioned that I didn't even put together myself. A separate member told me how they will now be paying $460 for daycare that week and losing $400 in income that they could have otherwise worked on those $2 for a total of $860. And I know those numbers might not sound big, but they are meaningful and they are important to members in this district who work and who especially now are contributing more to their health care each year at rising premiums. I think it's important for the board and the administration to know that the members and the faculty and staff are here tonight, many of whom are here with their families, and those that were unable to attend due to childcare and work schedules are here not in defiance, but instead because they want to be a part of a team that the superintendent spoke of on those in-service days in September this year. I'd like to think that we have shown a desire on our part to be a working part of that team and showing an ability to compromise. The association shown a willingness to be flexible with the contract. We opened a sidebar to grant the superintendent a change to the first day of school and the half day before winter break. Did we have to? No, but we assumed positive intent by the administration. And I know you would also agree that the entire faculty and staff in our district is one that has always been willing to sacrifice for the benefit of their students, their bosses, the district. They go above and beyond the contract each and every day. I know you know that. I heard that in Mr. Fallon's statements, and we greatly appreciate them. But I will also tell you that when the same sense of teamwork is not reciprocated, that sentiment of compromise and sacrifice wears thin over time. Real meaningful teamwork takes input from all stakeholders and then makes decisions. Even if that means being vulnerable to the possibility that the stakeholders might not like what you have to say or what you are presenting. This calendar change was a decision in which the primary stakeholders, the people here who are affected by this, the employees of this district, were left out. Was it politically easier to avoid getting input in a certain managerial prerogative? Of course. but it also does not help encourage the stakeholders to assume positive intent on the part of their administration. We acknowledge the district's ability to set the calendar, but by failing to include the primary stakeholders in the decision, we are going to demand the ability to bargain the impact of these changes, which even the superintendent's own admission are negotiable items. If these calendar changes do go through, you can expect that the faculty and staff will continue to conduct themselves as the professionals they are. But you can also expect them to ask us to continue to advocate for them as their representatives. For this reason, we are prepared to file a ULP for the failure to bargain the changes, the working conditions on their behalf. I am once again asking the Board of Ed to consider the impact of this change on the valued employees that you do speak of, the valued employees of this district, and to reserve the right to negotiate this change in working conditions by opposing the proposed start date for the calendar changes for 2019-2020. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board? Seeing none, I will close this opportunity for public comment, and we will move on. Board discussion. First, an initial matter. I sent an email to all board members today asking that you undertake the process of going onto the school board's website and fill out a board self-evaluation. I'm setting a deadline within the next 3 weeks, so that means by Election Day, November 6th, I'll ask you to all have filled out the self-evaluation. And as we've discussed at the last 2 meetings, that's a prelude to having our board retreat. Gwen Thornton has provided us some possible dates for that. They're in the email that each of you got this afternoon, but the possible dates that Gwen has given us are 2 Saturdays, November 17th and December 1st. The other 2 dates are Wednesday evening, December 5th, or Thursday evening, December 13th. I'll just note that December 5th is, that week is a week we don't have a board meeting, so it will be opposite. So, that might be, something for us to consider if we're all available that night. But the message is get to work on the board self-evaluation, and then we'll, at the next meeting, talk about setting a date. Is there any further board discussion of the presentation we've had tonight? And let's move on to discussion of the addendum items on the agenda. The addendum items are A10 through A15 and C12 through C24 and D11 through D15. These are matters that were not on the agenda at the last work session meeting, and that's the reason I'm asking for any discussion of those items now. Okay, I'm going to move on to then action items.
Mr. President, I'd like to move items A1 through A8 and items A10 through A14.
Second. Any discussion of those items? Greg?
So I wasn't here last meeting, for which I apologize for, but had a prior commitment during the discussion about the calendar. So I had a couple of questions. One, is there a hard deadline for when that needs to be submitted? Because I looked through the website for the sending districts as to what their status is, and I don't see updated calendars. So I'm curious, one, is there a hard deadline? And two, how has this proposal coordinated or not with sending districts?
They all have the same proposed calendar, and they're waiting on us to approve it because then they're planning on following suit.
Okay. Next question is, it seems historically, if my recollection is correct and consistent with this calendar, that the 2 professional days occur in sequence at the beginning.
Yes.
Is there an importance in those 2 days, one happening at the beginning and 2 that they are one following the other? I just don't know.
So the decision about the professional development days, they have historically always been those first 2 days, and the 2 days in October used to be spread out over the year, but the feedback from the staff was actually they wanted those days front-ended at the beginning of the year, so that way when we go over things in the past years, it's been things like Google Classroom that are new for the year. They'd rather obviously have that training up front. The first 2 days, we also use a half of one of those days for freshman orientation, so it's a lot of opening of school type of professional development. So that is, that's not to say that in the future we couldn't look at doing those differently, but for the most part, in terms of the way we utilize them right now, they're certainly structured so that at the beginning of the year is when they're most effective.
And one of the things that I've noticed in the calendar as it's evolved over the more than decade I've been watching it is that President's Day weekend has shrunk from what was a 5-day weekend down to a 3-day weekend. And I've noticed the Friday before Memorial Day popping up where it didn't exist before. And so I'm wondering whether, given those changes, whether there was some consideration or still can be to try to accommodate, I think, the priorities of making sure we have 4 snow day options available and some of those changes to be able to accommodate what we're hearing from the Teachers Association.
So we actually have those in the changes in the current year calendar where we only have a 3-day President's Weekend and a 4-day Memorial Day weekend, and that is so we have an extra day to take because at President's Weekend it's so early in the winter that it's hard to take that day back because generally we have a lot of snow days in February and March. So in designing this, the sending our K-8 districts and we started talking about this over a year ago. And I should clarify that I don't want to speak for their boards because they haven't taken action on it yet, but I do know they're waiting for us to take action. A couple of them have committed to approving it, and the others are in the process of discussing it. But in terms of all the considerations that we talked about last time, the issue with, we are ending fairly early in June, and so if we did not go with this version of the calendar, chances are that I'd make the change that we'd have to go into that last week of June. And we run into issues, and the K-8s in particular run into issues with camps, with students signing up for camps. With our students, we have to reschedule final exams for quite a few of them because any of them who make summer commitments, they go to Boys State, Girls State, or other types of experiences, those generally start earlier in June than we get out. So that's a problem. So, while we're adding those 2 days at the end of August, we're ending significantly earlier in June. And again, the instructional time is really what we're looking at with starting the year earlier, and especially at the high school level with all of the AP testing, the PARCC testing, and it's the same at the K-8s. That all happens when we're only about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through the year. And so we're actually, this area of the country is one of the last to, start shifting our school year, a little bit earlier. It's not something that we're looking to shift earlier than this because frankly, we have a lot of summer programs here going on all summer long, and so we wouldn't be able to get the building ready much earlier than that. But this is something that we, with the K-8 districts, we've been talking about it for a couple of years, and now, the way the calendar worked out this year, with the way that it falls, it made sense to move forward with it this year, which is also why we want to get it approved now so that everyone has a lot of notice in terms of making their plans. The other adjustment with this is for the winter holiday break, we would be coming to school on Monday, December 23rd, but this allows us to close the building for that day, which makes sense for a lot of reasons, but it also allows folks to travel. And the other piece that we're really trying to accommodate is last year when we had to take back almost all of spring break, it caused a lot of issues for a lot of folks. And in terms of from a learning perspective, the teachers had a really hard time. They did a tremendous job with trying to continue learning without penalizing students who weren't here. And so I'm really trying to not have to do that again. And that's what, this helps out with as well. So there's a lot of considerations that go into developing the calendar. And I've talked to the staff, and it really is it's a variety. The opinions about it are very mixed, because there's some folks who are fine with it and happy about it, because anyone who's here for the last 2 weeks of August, you would think school is in session because there's so much going on here already. Our entire football season was shifted a week earlier, so that's another point with this. It also actually helps with our transportation, because we have to contract our bus drivers prior to September 1st. We actually don't currently contract them prior to September 1st, but now that all of our activities have shifted prior to September 1st, that's another issue we have to address. So there really are a lot of considerations that we've been talking about, that I've been talking about with the K-8 superintendents for the past couple of years. And so this we do really feel is the best educational approach to the calendar. And I know that it's going to cause some folks to change their plans, and it's going to cause different complications for different folks, which is why we're trying to put it out there in October so everyone has as much notice as possible. And we'll work with people, who on a case-by-case basis who have things that they can't work out. But please know that there are a multitude of different considerations that I have to take into account when we're trying to plan a calendar. And it's not that I'm ignoring anyone's particular input or any group of stakeholders, but it's in terms of looking at the needs of the students, the parents, the teachers, what the state requires in terms of days, testing, it runs the gamut, and then coordinating it with our 4 K-8 districts. So it really, this process started last spring, where we started looking at different versions of the calendar. So that's where we are now.
Speaking to having to manage calendars for big organizations, I do not relish that job at all. It's probably one of the hardest things to try to make everyone happy with. And just an observation that I've had, it seems colleges are starting earlier. I know other faculty that I work with who have students in other districts, they are starting before Labor Day. The students actually are in class before Labor Day, so I'm seeing that trend. So to that point, my question is this, in your prediction, a one-time anomaly, or is this probably going to carry on in the future, or it depends on where Labor Day falls?
So when I did take a look at the next 2 ends of August and beginnings of September, and it's hard to say for sure until I lay out the entire calendar, because each year, too, for example, this year we had both Jewish holidays in September fall on weekdays, and that hasn't happened in the past. So we've usually had one on a weekday and one's fallen on a weekend, so that was an additional day that we had off this year. And the same thing when Christmas falls in the middle of the week, it makes that break longer. So I have to lay out the entire year first. But looking at the future, looking at 2020 and 2021, in 2020 it looks like it would be similar, where it would be the 29th, I think it's the 29th and the 30th that year, that Wednesday and Thursday, because Labor Day is around the 4th or the 5th. The following year, September 1st is actually the Tuesday prior to Labor Day. So likely what we would do that year is we'd have the teachers come in on the 31st and the 1st, and the students would start the 2nd, or something along those lines. So it's not that I'm looking to back the calendar up further in August, it's just to get started prior to Labor Day, when prior to Labor Day happens to be at the end of August. So in terms, and I actually, we had our regional meeting this morning with the K-8 superintendents, and we actually said that we put together a calendar for next year, just to start talking about that already, to see what it looks like.
Thank you.
Sure.
So you mentioned that this has been something that you've been talking about for several years, and certainly something that you've been talking with the sending districts for, since last spring. Mm-hmm. When was the faculty brought into the conversation?
I believe it was at our professional relations meeting in September, when we finally had a draft of the calendar to speak to. So it was right after school started.
And that's when you began hearing some of the objections to the calendar, or?
Yeah, I did not go into this thinking that everyone would embrace it with open arms. So I fully, we talked about, I talked with the other superintendents, about what we knew some of the concerns would be. So it's not that I presented it to the staff or to the association thinking that everyone would be in favor of it. So, you know, it's not that I didn't have that information until September.
All right, but you didn't engage with them in conversation about it until September?
No, and I generally don't. My practice with the calendar, it's in the contract that we are to consult with the association when we have a draft of the calendar proposed, and the other districts follow the same suit. I don't ask for input from every group on the calendar, because as was seen from this too, in terms of the input I got that the association shared from the staff, it ran the gamut from adding days to the end of the year to you know, not having professional development at all, to it was a wide array. And so it was a good example of why it's going to be hard to come up with a calendar that everyone's going to be happy with. You know, that's why it's a very careful and deliberate process.
And then related to that, you know, Dr. Jabelski, you know, highlighted the fact that May 22nd is now on the calendar as a planned holiday, and historically that has not been on the calendar. That's actually been a snow day that if we had any left over, we kind of would give back late in the year. So, you know, that one, if we look at following a more historical calendar, meaning starting after Labor Day and then starting school on the 4th, by pulling that off the calendar and putting it back into the bank for snow days, and then coming to school on the 23rd of December would give us our 5 snow days and still allow us to end school on the 19th, which is where you're targeting to end currently.
Historically, our calendar had that day in February, so that's not an extra holiday in the calendar. It's just shifted from February to May.
Yeah, when you calculate it as it relates to snow days, that and the 23rd would give us 5 snow days if you shifted back into, you know, the normal sequence we've historically gone by.
That is correct.
And that would still allow us to end on the 19th.
That and the 23rd, I'm sorry, would not give us, no, that would give us 4. Because if you consider that, the other version, we're in school on the 23rd. So no, that does not, we would end up with 4 snow days if we took that back.
And how many snow days does this calendar give us?
It gives us 4 with the day in May that we can take back if we need to.
Being the 5th.
Being the 5th, you know, but it's right now it's a day off.
And then the other option would be to mirror the calendar that we had in 2014, which started in that date, and then we ended actually on the 23rd.
You're going through every version of the calendar that exists, so yes, that's all true. But this is the one that the board had decided to move forward with last time, and you know, so that's why this is the one on the agenda to be approved, as we had discussed at the last meeting. So yes, every single version you gave is another potential version of the calendar.
I also think it's important for the board to remember that setting the calendar, you know, is a board decision to not micromanage the schools, but to decide whether or not we're going to accept the administration's recommendation on what the calendar should be or not. But it is not something that we have historically discussed with or deferred to the association with regard to the calendar. We all, except perhaps Susan on this board, remember what it was like last spring when we had to take back the day at the end of the year. It caused a lot of angst, not just for parents and students, but for members of the association as well. And you know, given that it is the board's responsible for the calendar, and given our, you know, if, as we discussed last time, we want to avoid being in that situation that we were in last spring, you know, I would urge board members to vote in favor of the calendar as it's proposed on the agenda.
And just help me understand how this calendar, the way that it's structured, would enable us to avoid what happened last spring.
We have with this calendar, we have the opportunity, if we need it, to take the February day, if we know that early, and if we don't, we have the opportunity to take the May date as the 5th day, knowing going into it that's a possibility.
But I think what contributed to the issues last year regarding spring break was the fact that we lost so many days in March after we had exhausted the days going through that. So even with this calendar, you know, if we end up with a March storm, we're still going to have the same problem.
You're speaking to one of the reasons for the calendar. So no, we still have.
But I was responding to what Mr. Fallon had just said.
But
You're correct, Bob.
Can someone just remind, how many snow days did we have here last year?
In the calendar last year, we either had 4
No.
or 5 built in. And
I mean, like, how many did we have to use?
Well, we
like,
had
how
to
many
take
days?
3 back from spring break, or 2.
So
I
we
took
used
1
8.
back from. I'm sorry, I took 1 because we took the one earlier from February break, I believe, from I think it was February break. And
So we
then
used
took,
8 days?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm still not confident that this will be enough, but that's what we're trying. And again, that's one of the reasons I could add days to the end of the year and we can go later in June. But again, if we're looking at this educationally, we're trying to front load the instructional days ahead of all of the high stakes testing in the spring. So that's why, I did, and in discussing it with the K-8 districts, why we didn't do that and just go later in June, because there's a lot of problems when we go later in June in terms of conflicts with students and families.
Well, and I understand that, and I'm to Mr. Fallon's point, I'm not suggesting in any way that we absolve our responsibility, to allow others to dictate what we should be doing. Obviously, this is your recommendation, and the board has to, act accordingly. That said, we do need to look at what environmentally might, does this create? And if we end up making a decision that, ends up creating some hardship, some loss of income, some increased expenses to our faculty members because of the shifting of those 2 days, and there are other options to accomplish the same goals without creating that disruption, I think just from a standpoint of trying to be good partners in education, that we would at least explore what some of those options are. And I would have hoped that we would have been engaged with them earlier in the process so that we were aware of whatever the issues were going to be.
I appreciate that, but that is not how we develop the calendar.
I like the comments Bob's making. From my perspective, when I looked at the calendar that we're voting on tonight, the second calendar, the 2 things that struck me as good were the, not having to have that one Monday by itself in December, and then, adding more snow days, because, it was a disaster when we had to cut into the, spring break last year, and I think everyone agreed with that. So that's what struck me as good, so that's why, I initially supported on it. And I thought, from my perspective, I thought maybe the majority of our faculty would like it as well, but now that appears to not be the case. So I guess with that being said, and again, the point Bob was making with the the effects on the school, potential effects on school environment, whatever, I think I might reconsider the calendar as it is now.
Greg?
Just a question, what regulation, if any, there are on federal holidays, and can they or can they not be school days? Meaning specifically Martin Luther King, Washington's birthday. I just don't know.
They can be.
They can be used as school days. I thought they could.
Any further discussions?
No.
So we have a vote, Mr. Size?
Mr. Fahey?
Yes, we're voting through, are we voting all the way to A15 or just to A?
Well,
A1 through A8.
A1 through A8,
and A10 through A14.
Okay.
And that includes A4.
Yes, so yes to all of them except A4.
Okay. Mr. Hayek?
No on A4 and yes on the rest.
Okay, Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr.
Mr. Morrison? No on A4, yes to the rest. Interesting. Mrs. Ober?
Yes to all.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Okay, motions carry. Let me do A4 real quick, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's 5-3.
Yep, we're good.
I want to make one comment to the board, guys. We discussed this at the last board meeting, and I asked for all of your input, and I asked for your input prior to that. I brought it to a committee, because this is not a decision I put forward. I know that you guys have to approve it. And then I did send it out last week again, letting you know that it was going to be on the agenda for approval, and if anyone had additional concerns or questions, to please reach out to me ahead of time so that we can have a more productive discussion. And I do just want to reiterate that it's very helpful when you do that ahead of the meeting, because if there are issues and concerns, we can then talk about them and you know, possibly make adjustments, or I can get more information. But considering this is something that involves the 4 sending districts as well, it's very hard to make a change on the fly like this. So I feel the need to reiterate that it is so much more helpful when you reach out to me with those kinds of concerns ahead of time.
With all due respect, my concerns that I shared at the last meeting are consistent with concerns that I shared this evening.
Move on. Will somebody make a motion on A9?
I make a motion on A9 and A15.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Someone gonna second it?
Second.
Any discussion on A9 and A15? Do we have a vote, Mr. Stiles?
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger? Yes. Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Mr. President, I'd like to move items C1 through...
You got a B first.
Oh, I'm sorry, B1.
Thank you. Someone want to second it?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion of item B1? Roll call vote, Mr. Stiles?
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Mr. President, I'd like to move C1 through C24.
Someone want to second it, please?
Second.
Mr. Ford? Any discussion of C1 through C24? Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Stiles?
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
I'm abstaining on C21 and I'm voting yes on everything else.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Mr. President, I'd like to move items D1 through D13.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion of D1 through D13?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd just like to call the board's attention to D12. Resolved, the Board of Education accepts with gratitude a donation in the amount of $2,000 from the Society for Science and the Public and Regeneron to be used to support excellence in science, math, and/or engineering education.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Those, that and other donations, when we get them, are greatly appreciated, and they're a big part of allowing us to do what we do. There's no further discussion. We'll have votes on resolutions D1 through D13.
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Mr. President, I'd like to move items D14 and D15.
Second.
Any discussion on D14 and D15? We have roll call vote, Mr. Stiles?
Mr. Fahey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayek?
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mrs. Ober?
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky?
Yes.
And Mr. Fallon?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
We're now at the second opportunity for public comment, if anyone wishes to address the board.
Except for those guys,
I
sorry.
will close the second opportunity for public comment. Other business, Mr. Shabelski.
Oh, geez, thanks for the cue. I think knowing that there has been an association survey that was done that we have seen in years past, I would just ask that we have an agenda item at an upcoming meeting at your discretion that's discussed, and it's also my understanding that the full document's available for all board members to review, although not necessarily all have reviewed it up until now, but that a summary of that with the most important prioritized points has been produced, and that could be shared with all the board members so that could be a starting point for discussion.
Yeah, the superintendent has shared that we received a summary from the association, which she will be distributing to all board members. And any board members who haven't had a chance to read the full survey, if they want, can make an appointment with Dina, the administrative assistant to the superintendent, and go do that. And then from there, we'll have a board discussion, which I think could run the gamut from whether or not we should conduct our own climate survey to the usefulness of the information in this one, and whether we're going to ask the administration to take any actions with respect to that. Anyone have anything to add to that?
Thank you.
Any other business?
Can I just make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
Is there a possibility of when we call the vote for action items that we call it random and not alphabetically?
I had asked that many years ago.
I don't like doing it. I mean, it's a pain in the neck. I could change that.
I don't know that I understand the question.
The idea is that
He
you
wants to
wouldn't
change
always
the
be
format, the order.
The beginning of the alphabet wouldn't always be the first people to vote on a particular motion.
On a particular item.
So if there's a controversial motion that does that disenfranchise the early alphabet voter and leave the late alphabet voter with more wiggle room to influence their vote. Fair.
And I'll tell you honestly, several years ago, I had asked the same
He
thing.
did, and I don't like it.
It went nowhere at that
I didn't
time.
like it then.
But it's a matter for the board to decide, despite what the business administrator or the board secretary may feel.
Perhaps a topic for our retreat. A little sidebar.
Would be interesting if we get to that as a retreat.
Well, I'm sure one of our coding courses could come up with a way
Yeah.
to randomize the
Yeah,
last
that would be
names for you, Mr. Stiles,
That
so
would
you
be
don't
good.
have to figure it out.
If our coding guy.
I was
that would be
thinking a
great.
little bird like Groucho Marx used to have would come down and give Tim a list of the order in which to ask.
Tonight's order is.
I'm happy that I remember how to get here. You want me to change names and everything? Gee whiz.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?